giant variable regarding the answer to that question is whether we're talking about a minivan or a full size. And there are other factors to consider as well. I'll talk about minivan, wheelchair vans first because the answer to the question is simpler than with full size. The vast majority of minivans that are wheelchair accessible are side entry ones that have been converted when brand new by the industry giants Braun, Rycon, or one of their related companies. Those vans have a deeply lowered floor, and the lowered floor area begins at the front edge of the rear seat and goes all the way to the point directly underneath the dash. In these vans, the floor is smooth and level and it's made of steel. Due to the lowered floor, the original front seats are mounted on what we call a pedestal, which causes the level of the passenger seat to be the same in relation to the windows as a normal van. Either of those front seats with pedestals under them can be easily and quickly removed in a couple of minutes. And the seat assemblies usually have little wheels on them, and so you simply flip a lever and the seat assembly releases from the floor. And by using the wheels, you can easily roll the whole unit right out of the van and to wherever you're going to store it. Once either that front passenger or driver's seat has been removed, then you have an open, solid, level area to park a wheelchair. And a great feature these vans have is that the manufacturers anticipate one or both front seats being removed at some time, and so there are anchor points in the forward floor area that are ready to attach manual anchor straps to in order to secure the wheelchair. Some people parking a wheelchair in front choose to have a system installed called an Easy Lock, and that's an electronic securing system that's super simple and easy to use, and there's no need for straps of any kind. And so that's how the idea of parking a wheelchair in the front area of a lowered floor side entry minivan works. I'll briefly mention that there are a small percentage of wheelchair accessible minivans that have tall roofs rather than lowered floors. And for a couple of reasons, it's usually very costly, difficult, or even impossible to park a wheelchair in the front of those. So now let's go over the answer to the question about parking a wheelchair in the front of a full-size wheelchair access van. The answer is not nearly as simple and routine as with the minivans. I'll break this down into two configurations of accessible full-size vans. There are tall roof vans and ones with a lowered floor, and occasionally a van will have a combination of both. As with many topics related to wheelchair vans, I'll go over the norms which occur the vast majority of the time. Full-size access vans with tall roofs differ in one very important way regarding this parking a wheelchair in front subject. And that is, if the van began as what most folks would call a cruising or touring style van, it will usually have a ceiling above the front area of the van, which typically has a TV and video system installed above it. That ceiling is at the same height as a ceiling in a van with no tall roof, which is only tall enough for about 25% of folks in wheelchairs to sit under. The other 75% need more space above their head. And so even though lots of people automatically think that a tall roof means that there's lots of headroom in the front, allowing parking the wheelchair up there, unfortunately that's not usually true. I'll mention that if a full-size wheelchair van with tall roof was built when new for that specific purpose, it usually does not have that low ceiling above the front area, and so there's plenty of headroom. Unfortunately, only about 10% of tall roof, personal use, full-size access vans are built new for that purpose. About 90% are created by taking a new or used cruising touring style van and adding mobility access features to it. And they have the low ceiling in front. The other major type of full-size mobility vans are ones that from the outside appear to be a normal van because they have no tall roof. The way they achieve their added interior headroom and entry clearance is by having a major modification, which is that the floor has been lowered. In regards to the subject of parking a wheelchair in front, this is pretty simple to answer regarding these vans. Many of these floors are lowered only in the middle area of the van, which does create extra clearance when entering the side of the van and also extra headroom once inside. In those vans, there is a 4 to 8 inch ledge where the lowered floor is, just behind the front seating area. This ledge prohibits rolling the wheelchair into the front. And so even if there were enough headroom in front, such as for a short person in a short wheelchair, they could not get past the ledge. The good news is that there are a small percentage of these lowered floor full-size vans that have a lowered area of floor in the front passenger and or the driver's area. This is in addition to the middle of the van having the low floor. And so if the van has the low floor in either front location, as well as in the middle of the van, then you can park a wheelchair there due to the extra headroom. I'll note that the lowered floor is also necessary for a person who wants to drive from a wheelchair in order for their legs to fit under the steering wheel. And just as I mentioned earlier with low floor minivans, when there is a lowered floor in either or both front seat locations, those seats usually have quick release mechanisms and also the anchor points in the floor for anchor straps. That covers the vast majority of circumstances regarding the question about parking a wheelchair in the front of a wheelchair van. You now know that there are a number of variables that cause it to be possible or not possible to park a wheelchair in the front.